appears to be working.
Yep.
Okay, so today I'm pleased to welcome Ben to the podcast. He's kindly joined me to talk about his experience setting up a self-employed business and stepping out on his own full-time. Hi Ben, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
And I think if we start with a brief introduction about you and your background.
Absolutely, sure. Well, I spent the last 15 years or so in a career in IT support in education, both higher education and secondary education, and then made the natural move to become a full-time photographer.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Absolutely. No, essentially, it's just a case of course correction and deciding what I wanted to be doing. But a lot of time spent within IT, a little bit of project management experience. I hold a Prince 2 practitioner's certification, ILM 5 for leadership and management. Bit of experience, been around the block a bit, I'd say, but finally decided on where I want to be.
Which is photography.
Yeah.
Just checking. Yeah. My first question really, given how easy it is these days to get access to semi-professional camera equipment on Amazon or whatever, as there is one in this room right now in fact, does that make it more difficult or more frustrating for you to kind of find and win business as a professional? Do you face the, I could do that myself problem quite a lot, or...?
It does happen for sure. I mean, as you say, it is easy for people to pick up the basic kit and get started. So it does lead somewhat to market saturation. But in all honesty, and this is going to sound a bit harsh, it's saturated with mediocrity. It is true though. And I think that ultimately, when someone is bringing to the table what I'm bringing to the table, what other contemporaries in the industry are bringing to the table, 12, 13 years of experience, a lot of very professional kit, we've been there, we've done it, we know how to make these images and make them work first time. If you're employing someone who's been doing it for 3 months, they've bought a camera off Amazon and they're just giving it a go, you get what you pay for.
Right.
Okay, I'm not finding an issue finding clients who are willing to pay reasonable rates for good work. I make no bones about the fact that there are people out there who could do the job cheaper, but the quality might not be there. At the end of the day, I kind of work with people who want the job done first time correctly. They don't want to have the phone call where they say, could we give it another go because, I got the settings wrong on the camera, or I was using the wrong lens, or I've accidentally deleted your images. I only have one card slot in my camera and they've gone. Things like this you don't get when you employ a professional photographer who has a decent level of experience and the right kit.
Stepping out on your own and becoming full-time self-employed or freelancer or whatever you'd like to call it, what would you say has been the biggest challenge to doing that and getting yourself up and running?
For me, it's been about marketing.
Okay.
That has been an immense challenge. I don't have a background in marketing to people. I'm good with the images, so I have a back catalogue of images that I can use for advertising, but at the same time understanding the best techniques, the best methods. Writing copy has not been something that I've found a natural skill. I'm constantly second guessing myself. Do you use Google ads? Do you use Facebook ads? Do you go more traditional and use magazines and newspapers? What's best? Who knows? I certainly don't. So that's been a big challenge for me.
Capturing someone's happiest day, if all goes well. I mean, that has a certain pressure of its own, surely.
It does. It's true. It's true. And funnily enough, that harks back to what we were saying earlier about hiring a professional with the experience and the equipment. It is a lot of pressure. If something goes wrong, you can't just repeat it. But I'm happy to say that in all the time I've been doing it, nothing has gone wrong because I put the effort into learning my trade, buying the appropriate equipment and knowing how to deal with difficult circumstances when they arise, like difficult light or a rainy day, things like that. So again, it's where you kind of get the value from employing someone who has the experience and has the setup.
Yes, well, that's very well answered. I can't argue with that at all. Well done. Yeah. Touch wood that it remains that way as
absolutely. Well. Absolutely. There'll always be one day.
Yeah.
But I like to think that as long as you've got the experience, there's not too much that can be thrown at you. And if it's a total loss, at least your clients will understand that you did everything that you physically could. I mean, if an EMP went off or something stupid, I mean, there wouldn't be a lot I could do about that. But
it's just no excuse. I mean, why not? What is your favourite or the best thing about what you do?
That's a good question. I think in a lot of ways it goes back to that whole being there on the happiest of days. It's just a great thing. Every conversation I have with a client tends to be really positive. There's no lack of good things to be said. Everyone's excited. They're just looking forward to seeing what you do with capturing the day. And I adore my handover sessions. So when I have finished the job, I will tend to meet with my clients and show them their images. And I love being there for that, because it's that first time they're looking through the memories, as it were, of their wedding and what they get to keep. Because at the end of the day, when you've got married, there are three things you walk away with: a bit of paper, some rings, and the photos. Everything else is very fleeting. It tends to...
What about your partner for the rest of your life, Ben? I mean, that's a pretty big one as well, surely.
Of course. But as a couple, the things that you take away are the rings, the paperwork, and the photos. So, it's worth investing in them in that way. But being there for that first viewing, I find very rewarding. I want to see people enjoying those images, and so far so good. I've not had a session where people have looked through them and been disappointed. Everyone's always very happy, very complimentary, and it's just nice to see them reliving that day. It's only been a few weeks, or 6 to 8 weeks down the line, but already that people will be saying, "Oh yeah, no, I missed that on the day," or "Oh, I remember that happening. I've forgotten that," and it's nice. It's really nice. Definitely one of my favourite bits.
I mentioned COVID then. Sorry, I nearly got through a whole episode without bringing it up. But considering the face-to-face nature of your work and the restrictions we've had, especially in the UK until quite recently, I guess it would be remiss of me not to ask about it. Do you think your industry is through the worst of it, or are there still challenges ahead? If so, what do you think they're going to be?
With lacking a crystal ball, my hope is that the wedding industry is through the worst of it. Obviously, that is entirely dependent on whether or not we end up with a new variant of concern. If that happens, all bets are off. And I think that's the same for a lot of industries. I mean, we've already seen, certainly in the UK, we have seen how the government views weddings and where they place it in terms of priority, and it's fair to say that they consider it fairly low. So I fully expect that should there be a development with another strain of this virus, we'll end up back at square one. But what I would say is that if things continue going the way they're going, we've now got a backlog of 1.5 years, nearly 2 years worth of people who are keen to get married, and they're keen to have their day. And we're seeing that already. There's an uptick of bookings, of interest. It's definitely something people are waiting to do. So if and when we get to quote unquote the end, whatever form that takes, whether we learn to live with COVID or it finally kind of dissipates into the background like a flu, who knows? But when that does happen, I think we will certainly see a bit of a wave of people just kind of catching up with their social lives and saying, right, now it's time to pop the question. Let's get on and have this wedding. Or even not just the weddings, but let's get on and have that photo shoot that we wanted, that family photo shoot that we've been keen for. So yeah, it's, I'm hoping we're through the worst of it, and I think that there will be a bit of a bounty to be reaped by the prepared.
No, fair enough, and well, best of luck. I hope it all does materialise for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? A lot of people walking away, and we've certainly seen that, or I've read about it in the entertainment industry and hospitality as well.
Definitely in hospitality.
Yeah, I mean, there's people, I was reading a few weeks back about a Michelin-starred restaurant in London who are struggling to find any staff to the point they've had to stop serving lunch because everyone left the industry during COVID and they don't want to come back in case it happens again.
Well, it's been a bit of a double whammy in a way, hasn't it? Because you've got COVID, obviously, which has made the hospitality industry very tricky to want to work in, because it's just not stable when you've got all these restrictions coming and going. People haven't been able to make their money, especially if you're wait staff, for example, and you rely on your tips. Because at the end of the day, even if you're being paid your basic wage or you've been furloughed, you're not getting your tips.
Yeah.
So you're not making the money that you'd be used to making. And then, dare I say it, there's also the other thing. We've got Brexit, and we've had a lot of Europeans have left the country, and it's fair to say that a good chunk of wait staff and people in the hospitality industry were from EU countries, and they've kind of decided to take their skills elsewhere.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, and actually, you mentioned about the tips and not making the same income. It made me immediately think of the airline industry as well. I mean, a lot of the people working on there, they may well have been furloughed. I mean, excluding the pilots themselves, I suppose. But they won't have been getting any of the usual things that make up their actual salary, like their away pay and all the extra perks and benefits they get. And they'll be getting none of that. So, I mean, they could have seen their incomes halved or worse.
Yeah. It's been pretty serious for a lot of industries, so it's completely understandable to see people reticent about going back into it.
Yeah.
And obviously, we the consumers will ultimately suffer because our choices, like you say, Michelin-starred restaurants even, not being able to serve lunch. I mean, that means people won't get that experience. It's a real shame.
To finish our time together today, it's what I call the Leadership Heroes segment, which is something will be doing with all of my podcast guests. And it's quite a simple question. If you had to pick any person, alive or dead, past, present, real, fictitious, that you would say perfectly embodies leadership, who would that be and why? And you can't say me. Or yourself.
Damn.
Or yourself.
That's both the ones I was going to pick. So I've actually picked two.
Oh, greedy.
I know.
My last guest did that as well. It was really rude.
Well, I've gone with one real one and one fictitious one.
Okay, that's sensible. All right, I'll allow it.